Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutshaw with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Paul Jun. He's a writer and photographer in the New York area, and we met through MBA several years ago. Can you introduce yourself, Paul?
Hi, thank you for having me. My name's Paul Jun. I am a writer and photographer, currently the editorial director at Collins, and also a community builder.
I think what you're doing is really good. I like the way you're being very authentic, and you're what I've seen in your writing
Oh, thank
and
you.
your photography is very, I think, inspirational too. Can you tell me how you kind of got into writing? I was just curious on that.
Yeah, it was actually a really weird time. So when I was living in Jersey, I was in community college. I paintballed, which is like kind of a fun sport and hobby. And through that, I met a really good friend who became in many ways a mentor. My friend Eddie. And he kind of realized he saw kind of what I was going through in life. I was a little bit aimless and a little bit just, I had no purpose in a sense. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my time in my life. And he just kind of encouraged me to like, hey, why don't you start a blog? That's kind of what people are doing these days.
Right.
And this was around 2010. And so this was at the height of when, I think blogs were getting really popular in the early 2000s, but around 2010, there were just more and more people were starting these ventures. And he, set up a website for me. He paid for a yearly subscription.
Wow.
Like it was really generous. And obviously, the first like 2-3 months was just obviously a struggle. It's like I never wrote, I never read. I was a jock my whole life. I played football, I played video games, I hung out with friends, I skipped class, I absolutely hated school. And so there was no sort of there was no like kind of signal in my past that was like, hey, you should be a writer. And I just kind of started, and over time I started noticing like it was just such a great practice to just get a lot of thoughts out, to empty your mind. In many ways it was like journaling. I
Right.
didn't publish everything that I was writing, and so over time I started just kind of feeling like, whoa, I'm getting into like I'm losing sense of time. I'm really enjoying the activity, and now it's what people call flow state. And so yeah, that was actually weirdly my introduction into writing. And over through writing, obviously that's what also encouraged me to start reading. And when I was reading, I started noticing just how different of an experience that was rather than sitting in a classroom. And that's how I started falling in love with reading. And then, when you go out and you're starting something, you're searching like what are the best tactics or what are the best wisdom from writers. And every single established or renowned writer was basically saying, in order to be a writer, you have to read and you have to write. Those are essentially the two practices that if you commit to that, you can really grow something. And to me, that was simple enough, right? I didn't have to go to school, I didn't have to get a degree. All I had to really do was just commit. And the first year was obviously a lot of on and off. It was like 3 months of writing, 3 months of self-doubt, 3 months of trying again. And then, at the end, once I invested in courses, I think that's when I finally was like, okay, I have some skin in the game. Like I have now investing in my education, and I want to kind of see where this can go. And by the end of year, when I finally got published on a site that wasn't mine, I felt a sense of accomplishment that was like, whoa, like someone was open enough to like let me publish my thoughts, on the gaming industry,
Oh,
and it was just amazing. It was such a vote of, it was just such a thing of confidence. I had never felt that kind of achievement before. And that's honestly what kept me going.
I think I heard you mention the mentor thing. Mentors are so important. People don't realize that because they usually
Mm,
have been down the path, and you can learn from them.
mm-hmm.
And then that probably gave you the motivation and the confidence to do that. I also think writing is kind of therapeutic in a way. You kind of
Absolutely.
mentioned the word journaling. I around the same time frame started blogging too around that. 2000,
Mm,
2010. Started doing that, the same thing. It was a therapeutic thing for me. But I think
hmm.
your story, because you said you or just you felt aimless, and now the writing helped you um, move forward. And you also got into, to me, you got into photography. So I'm thinking creativity is also something that's good for you that you didn't realize you had, right?
Yeah, that was so. So when I moved to Brooklyn in 2017, I was sorry.
You're from Brooklyn.
That what timing, right? It was like,
Yeah.
oh, we're in the city clearly. I was really burnt out actually when I moved to Brooklyn. I was taking on a new role. It was just a lot of change all at once, and I was juggling multiple sort of freelance gigs and taking on a full-time role. And I noticed I wasn't doing anything for fun. Like every waking hour of my life, including weekends, was just work, work. And when my younger brother visited me, Peter, he kind of saw like I was in this like kind of old sublet and very sad room, and he kind of noticed like, dude, like what are you doing? Like you live in New York City, why aren't you like venturing out and wandering? And weirdly, I kind of noticed like, oh wow, I haven't really been exploring. I've just been kind of playing it very safe. I've almost treating it like a temporary Airbnb. And he just gave me his old camera, and on weekends, I was like, okay, I'm not going to work today. I'm going to, exercise and get ready. And I'm just going to go and walk. I'm just going to walk around. And I would walk, 10, 15 miles around Brooklyn with a camera in hand, not knowing what I was doing. And then over time, it just kind of genuinely captivated me. I was very curious about photography, and a similar pattern. Once I invested in a workshop and really learned the tools, my friend Tori had done this like kind of intimate 5-person workshop, right? And by the end of the 2 or 3 hour workshop, I walked out of that building feeling completely different when I was holding that camera. It no longer felt like a tool that I was holding. It now felt like an extension of what I was seeing.
Right.
And that really took me down a whole path. I mean, what I think, and I love that you asked this, because I actually last year really questioned like, what is this for? Right. And like, what's this tool for? What's this craft for? Um, and really ultimately I think it's not so much the act of taking photos, it's that I just keep learning about myself and about the world, and that photography is a really interesting sort of vehicle that kind of takes you on these different roads and takes you into these different worlds. And I explored everything from product photography to portraiture to editorial fashion to street. And the more I kept learning about these worlds, and what I could photograph, the more that I fell in love with it. And um, yeah, that's kind of how that happened. I never set out to be like, I'm going to be a photographer, but it was just like this thing that just, and again, like I would make time for it. After work, I would tell myself, okay, let's do 2 to 3 hours of just like shooting with, photographing people or walking around and photographing, golden hour. It's like, and then on weekends, I would completely blocked off my weekends just to do like photography workshops, meetups,
Oh, wow.
just meeting different people. And I committed a lot of time into it. I think once I knew like, oh, I really love this thing. Within a year, I did, I think, like 7 or 8 workshops.
I mean, you were involved as a student, or
Yeah, as a student, like I would just find things on Eventbrite. I would find things on Instagram. I would follow photographers, and they would say like, "Hey, I'm hosting a 10-person workshop, in Lower Manhattan. Sign up, it's free, or sign up, it's $50." And I would just go and I would meet people. And it also kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone to like really embrace the city, and sort of embrace the chaos. And then I fell in love with it.
well, you also, to me, when you look through a lens, it also it's you're seeing it. I mean, when you take a picture, it's kind of what you're seeing, and
Hmm.
other you might have a different perspective than me if I took a pic. You know what I'm saying? A picture. So when you mentioned your brother gave you an old camera, was it old school with film or was it a digital?
It was a digital camera, very just kind of standard model. kind of like a beginner's thing. It was his first camera.
Gotcha.
He started going more into like video, and so his camera wasn't able to shoot video.
Gotcha.
And he didn't want to take this, thing with him to school, and so he kind of just gave it to me to kind of hold on to. And then one day I just kind of opened it and was like, oh, this thing's kind of cool. And then like just photographing things in my room and kind of playing around with the settings. Over time, I just kind of it nowadays it is now, it kind of forces me out the door, and it forces me to pay attention. It makes, just by having it around my neck, I interact with the world differently.
Right. You're exploring.
Um,
Right. You're exploring. Right.
right. It's like I'm New Yorkers are known to like walk very quickly. But the moment I have a camera around my neck, I'm actually very difficult to walk with. Because
Stopping.
you'll be 2 blocks ahead and turn around and go, wait a minute, Paul's still back there, and I'm like looking at something, looking at the light or interacting with a stranger. But yeah.
I kind of in the same way. We're in a little bit. I like nature, right? And so my husband,
Mm,
he's a very fast walker. So, but then he has to walk slower with me because I'm like, oh wow, I'll see something. I don't know. For some reason I've always like, you can find nature anywhere. You could find it in New
mm,
York. You know what I'm saying? I
mm-hmm,
just kind of like to look at that. Everybody has their thing. You had mentioned too, before we got on this call about the change that we all dealt with unexpectedly in 2020, and how I think everybody had to like pause, like, what am I going to do moving forward? And it's, in a way, it was good.
mm,
I think I'd like to see I always look at the good in a situation. What
mm-hmm.
was, do you think, looking back, your biggest challenge in from 2020, and then how you're gonna, I know that's a tough question. I was just curious.
Yeah, no, I love that. So around March, when everything sort of went into lockdown, I was in the middle of one of the worst processes in
Yes,
living in the city, which is moving
yes,
apartments. And that's a very stressful thing just by itself. But you layer on a pandemic, especially as it's unfolding, where no one is sure of anything. That was very, I underestimated what that did to me mentally. I think I was really good at sort of pushing those feelings aside and just being like, okay, need to work, need to move, need to, take it day by day. Um, I think for me, the most challenging thing was committing to the habits and the kind of foundational, I guess, like, yeah, the foundational habits that allow me to have clarity and peace of mind and um, just feeling good, overall. And it's now, I think 2020 for me was a year where it really, kind of showed me, hey, this is something that consistently shows up in your life. This is a pattern where when you stop exercising, you stop being active, you stop reading, you stop writing, you stop committing to habits, that everything else just starts to go haywire. Um, I have repeatedly, towards the end of 2020, I kind of looked at all my past journals from
oh
2017,
wow,
and it was very clear that there's this pattern where every time I reach a state of burnout or possibly depression or a lot of anxiety, it's because the things that keep me sane and the things that keep me grounded are amiss from my life. And so during the pandemic, it was so difficult to like keep those habits going, right? It's like I'm used to exercising outdoors in the sun or lifting weights. Now I have to like push myself to do like a workout in my living room, like as my computer is on. It was interesting to kind of feel those, all at once. I had never, like many people, I haven't experienced those feelings. And so a lot of my habits were flipped on its head. And, you know, week after week, this kind of like negative energy is like bottling up.
right.
And I'm trying to like will my way through this stuff, right? Thinking that it's about strength or just pushing yourself. And I just, it was a humbling realization when when lockdown started easing up, and the weather was getting a little warmer. I started, biking around the city, which I was always petrified to do. But since there were far less cars and far less people, it actually felt a lot safer. Um, and I just kind of did whatever I could to like return to those foundational habits that ground me. And but to kind of like rewater that, to kind of get that going again was just it's so hard, right? It's like, because habits really are about momentum, right? It's like you build a habit of, let's say, walking for an hour a day. For the first month it's very difficult. It's like you feel the resistance of like, oh, I don't want to walk, I want to stay inside, it's cold out.
Right.
But the more that you develop that habit around a certain time or a certain cue, it gets easier. It becomes automatic. And when the pandemic sort of flipped all of my habits, everyone's habits, upside down, um, I think I did a really good job of pretending that I was okay, because I had to psych myself up and be like, yeah, be strong, things are fine. Where really inside, it was extremely chaotic, and I was sort of my energy was kind of all over the place. I couldn't ground myself. And then that festered into like a lot of, you know, rage tweeting and arguing with strangers on the internet and fighting with your friends in the group chat about politics and the virus. And it's just like, all of this is because I was lacking sort of a self-control in my life, and that I was then reaching for it in other areas. And so that was very challenging, I think. And also, but at the same time, um, very refreshing to kind of get your ass kicked like that, and kind of
Wake up
find,
call, right?
yeah, it's like, hey, wake up. Like, how many times do you have to learn that, you're not exercising, you're not eating well, you're not getting good sleep? These all compound over time. Yet these are the very fundamental things that if you were to just commit to them, that the rest of your day and your life could ultimately be a lot better. But everyone's different. I think everyone has to learn and find what it is. What's that thing that keeps you grounded, right? What's that thing that keeps your mental clarity, present? And for me, it was as simple as like, exercising. If I exercise, I get good sleep. If I get good sleep, I wake up feeling better. And it's
Right.
just so fundamental. It's like we know these things, but it's like so hard to remind ourselves of like, hey, this is the foundation. Like, this is where everything else kind of builds on top.
Right. It does for very similar. You guys had it much, much harder than we did in the Atlanta area, right? And the county that I lived in, we had shelter at home. We joke about it was official on Friday the 13th, March the 13th.
Mm,
But I'm one of those people, I need to get out, right? I get energy from being around other people. And that's why I started Zooming more. And
mm,
I'm not a, you know, good photographer like you, but I just had to get outside. I have to run, right? And I have to. That's helps me keeps me sane. I think.
mhm,
I mean, I realize that, and but like a lot of the races, were all canceled. We're just like what?
mhm,
And I'm just part of my running group. We couldn't do it. That was even though I'm married and my husband's around, we still want to be around other people. But you know what I'm
mhm,
saying? It
mhm,
was a wake up call, right? And we started watching TV shows together, which we never did, which is kind of a good thing. I don't like being sedentary, but we learned
mhm,
and we talk about binge watched on certain things, which was kind of hilarious. So that's kind of a
mhm,
good thing because we never really, because took the time for that. And he had no traveling at all. They had to
mhm,
stop for work
mhm,
2020. And I don't know, your stuff is mostly in the New York area, so you don't have to like fly or travel or anything, right?
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, it was obviously the company I work for, has not done remote before.
right,
Well, a lot of companies have not done remote
right,
before, right? And all of a sudden, within a week or two, everyone is home, everyone's trying to figure it out, which is why there were so many Zoom meetings, because, there wasn't a way of managing, this before. And so I think, yeah, and it's so crazy too, right? It's like, that was almost like exactly a year ago. It's like we're
right.
entering February, and it's like this time last year, people were calling it the flu. People weren't taking it as seriously. And then by end of February, it's just like bang, lockdown, New York, everyone's home, ghost town. And that's amazing how fast time went by.
It's my I've had health issues in the past and had one of my
Mm,
some of the follow-up appointments I have annually, had to do some of them online, which
yeah,
is really weird.
yeah.
And then my doctor's telling me, because you need to stay home. Like, oh, I'm like a little bit of rebel. My husband made fun of me. I would go
Mm,
out every day and I'd wear a mask and I have to go, I'm sorry, to this store every day, but I would be safe. But I had to, that's just, I had to get out. I was about to, I had to, I don't know what it was, driving my car. And I certainly noticed in Atlanta, we drive a lot, but the traffic has gone down a lot. The pollution has,
mm,
you can see, has decreased. I don't have as
mhm,
many, I didn't put as many miles in my vehicle last year, so I see
mhm,
that. It's good, but I didn't realize how much I was, going out and driving. But that's kind of how the culture is here, where I live, right? Where you guys are more of a condensed area, and that probably why you guys had to shut down, and the virus spreads a little, I guess, better when you're, I don't know, condensed like that.
mhm.
And is it better this year so far, you think? Or is it, have they?
Uh, I think it's a little. I mean, it's mixed. It's like I think I heard. I mean, I would have to look it up, but so indoor dining was kind of shut off for a while.
That's hard
They
with the winter. Yeah.
Yeah, so they opened that up in the fall, I believe, of last year. So it was like a 25% capacity, which is total bullshit. I mean, a lot of restaurants were having way more than 25%. And I get it. It's like they needed to do that to make money to
Mhm.
keep things open. I think the city failed in supporting local businesses.
Right.
A lot of mom and pop shops closed up, and you see it when you walk around certain neighborhoods that were thriving
Yeah.
because of the mom and pop shops, because of community. And so that's been a little heartbreaking. But I think overall, like more and more people are outdoors. I think, around this time last year, a little later, people were just genuinely worried, like, can I exercise? Can I run around? Can I bike? And now it's like people are doing it with their mask on.
Yeah.
Last year I probably got tested more than like 10 times just out of safety.
Well, yeah, you're in a
Um,
bigger city than me, right?
because like once I started really, kind of going out and biking and going like long distance, I just wanted to play it safe. I did indoor dining a few times, and then afterwards I was kind of like, oh, I'm not really into this. Um, yeah, it was, but yeah, I'm hoping that, everything from vaccination to just now that, the weather eventually will start getting warmer. I think the winter has definitely gotten a lot of people just feeling down. And that's very typical of New York, right? It's
Right.
like you're usually stuck indoors and it's cold out. You kind of get like this seasonal depression. But now it's like I saw a really good tweet the other day where it was like, starting some period we get like 30 more minutes of sunlight, and that it keeps increasing every week. And it was just like, oh, like even the other day I was like, oh, wait a minute, it's 4:30 and it's not like dark out. And I was just like, oh, that just feels so much nicer, to have that sun. I think for me, it kind of reminded me of just how there are these fundamental things that we can do, to just, really ground us. And you can't ignore that. It's really hard to ignore that. You need to get sun, you need to walk around, you need to stay hydrated. It's like there are these fundamental things that I think I ignored so hard and just tried to kind of bulldoze my way through last year. And that only lasts for so long until your sort of battery's depleted.
Right. That's a good analogy. You deplete your battery. That you kind of,
Yeah.
it's fatigue. And I think I had, my sons are adults, but they still lived at home, and that was all. I was a little paranoid, to be honest with you, them hanging around. They're, younger, 21 at the time, and like,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna bring to me. But I was fine. And you'd mentioned about doing sports outdoors. I did do a race, a trail run. People thought I was crazy, but I wore a gaiter, a net gaiter that I think
Mm-hmm.
bikers use, and that I just needed that. And I quit going to the gym.
Hmm.
last year because that was really paranoid about that. I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah. No,
Indoor.
I still haven't gone
Yeah.
to a gym. It's just I'm not ready to do that yet.
No, I did get an elliptical delivered to my house because I need to change it
Hmm.
up as my you
Yep.
can't do the same thing over and over. Elliptical is fine, and I'm not the best at bike riding, so I I'm a runner, and lot we at least I'm so thankful that we live by a lake, and that's one of the reasons that was the lifestyle that we
Mm.
wanted, so I can go not me but my go out in the boat, but we still just I'm saying distance.
Hmm.
You're distance from people when you're on your own boat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's another thing for me. I think also was a far deeper appreciation for nature. I mean,
Yes.
in September, I took a 2 week break. I had launched a big project at my job, and I just kind of needed to take a breather. And that week for 2 weeks, so for the first week, I did a no phone, no laptop, no books, no podcasts, no news, nothing for 5 days. For the first 3 days, it felt like quitting cigarettes. It's like you're constantly reaching for your phone. You
Yes.
feel your body wanting to open the laptop and start doom scrolling on Twitter, and it's like and I pushed myself to stop watching. I started noticing like I would just kind of binge watch TV shows just to like kind of unplug in a sense, but it
Right.
got too much to the point where I even became aware like what are you doing, like why are you spending 6 hours just vegging out like this when you did that yesterday and the day before, and it's like
Mhm.
you need to do something else. I went to the beach for the first time all year. That was so that's also another realization for me, is like to be around a body of water is just immediately cleansing for me. It allows me to sort of empty out my thoughts. And in December, I took a trip upstate with my partner, and I literally stared at a fire for 12 hours a day in the freezing
That's
cold. I
cool.
mean, it felt great, but I didn't realize like that is what I needed. And I didn't even realize that's the kind of person I am, right? Living in Jersey, there was a lot of nature and a lot of trails, but I never wanted to do that stuff. Like my friends would always want to go on these hikes, and go look at like waterfalls, but I wasn't really into that. I just wanted to play sports. But now, after living in the city and being disconnected from nature, I realized like, oh wow, like this is what I need. This is what I need to return to. And even just this past weekend, with my younger brother, we went upstate to Hunter Mountain in the Catskills, and literally at night we just built like this huge fire and watched the sunset and was just surrounded by nature, and it was just amazing how that made me feel so just like good. Like
And
I just
grounded
it
too. Right.
really it really recharged me. And so and then coming back into the city, you actually feel a lot lighter, and a lot more just kind of ready to take on the week. And so that's something that I am holding myself accountable to, is like, as long as I keep living in the city, I need to commit to going into nature at least once or every 2 months. Like just don't go too long without being in nature.
I
um,
that's one of my taglines. I say nature is healing.
yes.
Because it is. I don't know what it's just it's calm. It's not a lot of noise, but the noise is a natural thing, if that makes sense. And
Mhm, mhm,
so it's I think we all need to appreciate that more, and I hope others do that.
mhm,
I don't know why I've always been that way. Maybe because I didn't I didn't know it outwardly that I needed it. But like you
mm,
said, especially last year, I've also noticed too. I get these reports on my iPhone of how much I try to reduce the screen, each week.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, but you don't realize how you're just. I just couldn't imagine. We're so ingrained to like have something like that, access to like catch up. I do try not. I don't watch news, even though I've said I binge watched like on Netflix and things like that, or
Mhm,
but I try not to watch. I don't watch the news because that I try to stay away from negative things
mhm,
because I will react possibly negatively.
mhm, mhm,
And
absolutely.
so, what do you suggest to people like for 2021? What is your best recommendation? What should they focus on? Since we're already almost middle of February. What should they focus on?
Yeah. I think, and this isn't really so new or profound, but it's like kind of, if you if you feel um like something is off, right? So actually, let me go back and give a clear example. So after I did my 2 week break in September, kind of cleared my mind, didn't consume anything, just kind of sat with my own thoughts, and I journaled a lot. I mean, like pages and pages of stuff. I went on very long walks and walked very slowly. That in its way, its own meditation. Um, um, I then I picked up books that, throughout my life have always sort of had this incredible impact on my thinking and my well-being. So a lot of the Stoics that I read, like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, I reread that stuff after I kind of cleared my mind. And there was a really beautiful thing that I've read, but so I bought a second book of this because the first one was filled with highlights and post-its. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm in like kind of a different period in my life, but I'm dealing with the same struggles. Let's read this book and see what I highlight differently. And there were some different things that I highlighted. And one of them was when Epictetus said, people basically turn to philosophy when your soul cries out, right? And when your soul cries out, it really means that what he's saying is like something is off, right? Internally something is just wrong. Like the way you're living, the patterns in your life are not true to like who you want to become or the kind of life you want to lead. And so philosophy is sort of that antidote, right? Philosophy helps you have actions and have principles or stories that ground you, but also keep you accountable into, sort of creating the change that, you want to see. And so, I have a lot of friends who are going through it right now. A lot of friends moved out of New York City within the first month or two of the pandemic, and they're kind of leading these whole new lives. And I always just kind of recommend to people, I think writing, journaling, is one of the most sort of cleansing, healing acts that a human can do. There's a great book called Why We Write. I believe the curator was Meredith Moran. She basically interviewed like a lot of different writers and just asked a single question: Why do you write? And there are really beautiful answers, right? Like I write to shed dead skin. I write to make sense of the world, right? I write to see. I write to pay attention. And I think a journaling practice allows us to have these conversations with ourselves that we otherwise don't have with other people. And, through that act of journaling, you might be aware like, oh, I'm really focused on, fame, or I'm really focused on money, or I'm really, negative about something. And it's like, it's not about judging yourself and being upset that you're having these thoughts. I think it's just okay to be aware of them. Right.
Right.
I was listening to, I forgot what podcast, but I'm gonna have to find it for you. But basically, the person described meditation, which I kind of now kind of connected to journaling, right? It's a form of meditation. It's almost like you're sitting, like there's like a waterfall, but like you're sitting behind the waterfall and you're watching all the water come down. Like that's like your mind, right? And you're just
Yeah.
observing. You're just kind of seeing what's coming down. You don't have to grab something and go, this is good or bad. It's like, no, just observe and just write it down. I think, writing and walking, committing to at least like an hour of walking a day, just, getting out, getting some sun, allowing yourself to just let your mind wander. The one thing I miss most about having a car is I used to get all my ideas when I drove,
Ah,
right? I would have literally stories in my head or headlines or, ideas itself. And so walking has been a way for me to just kind of mindlessly let my mind wander and kind of just, observe my thoughts. Um, but honestly, I think just starting with those two things, obviously they're very difficult to start if that's not a regular practice. But I think over time, you can start, allowing yourself to then welcome other habits. I think it's going to be very difficult to recommend people to be like, go exercise. It's like, that's a lot. I think that's a big jump. I think, starting small and building your way up
yes.
to have that personal accountability and to build a practice, right? Because in journaling, I became so aware of my daily patterns. Like, oh, I wake up and I do this thing, and around lunchtime I do this thing, and around the evening time I do this thing, and then you kind of zoom out and you kind of go, okay, are these patterns or are these behaviors, like what are they for, right? And then maybe through that practice, you kind of realize, oh, okay, you know what? I need to watch less TV at night. I think that's what's giving me
Yes.
bad sleep, right? I need to maybe do something else. I maybe need to go for a walk at night instead. Because it's obviously like the things that we used to do before the pandemic, are obviously gone. Like normally at night, I would want to hang out with friends. I would want to go get dinner. I'd want to maybe go get a beer, but you can't really do those things anymore. And so, um, yeah, it's what can you do for yourself that will allow you to feel most grounded. And I think starting with a writing and walking practice is simple enough that can then kind of point you to things that are more, I guess, helpful.
I like that you use the word simple because that some people try to do too much and it gets overwhelming and then they'll quit.
Yeah.
And keeping it simple, little steps at a time. And if you're going to journal, don't have a goal of writing 1,000 words. You know what I'm saying? You just
Right.
because you're not going to write, keep it small, just write something down. And I think your knowledge and your experience has been so helpful. And I absolutely love this conversation. Uh,
Oh, thank
where
you.
where can people learn more about you? Where can they, is there like you have a website, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's just pauljun.me, pauljun.me. That's where I put all my projects. I
Okay.
put all the essays I've ever published in one place. And my Instagram is Paul Jun Bear. I couldn't
There.
get Paul Jun, yeah, but that's where I basically, I actually haven't really posted much on Instagram last year. It was one of those things that I realized like, oh, why am I doing this? And it was
Yes.
tied to my photography. And because I wasn't going out and photographing as much, I just stopped publishing less. But that's kind of where all my where I share a lot of like what I'm working on,
Got
whether on my stories or on my feed. It's just a way for me to. That's where all my friends are, and a lot of my former colleagues and collaborators. And so, yeah.
Well, that's really good. I think it's a good idea to have for anybody to have your own URL for your. I mean, I really, really
Yes.
do because with social media, it just changes constantly, and you could lose your. I shouldn't say lose your content, but it's best to I think it's better to have control of it.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Absolutely.
Again, Paul, I thank you so much for your time, and it's been awesome. And hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. This was a fantastic start to my day. I am like
Awesome.
genuinely
Glad.
energized and like excited. It's still early here, and I'm just so glad we were able to have this conversation.
It's awesome. Thanks for
Thank
listening,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.